Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 148 of the Veterinary Behaviour Chat podcast. And today we've got another of our super popular 15-minute speed coaching sessions. And I have back with me the lovely Sharon Jones, and I'm going to ask Sharon to introduce herself in a second. And we've got a slightly different question this time. So just to explain the rules of the game of the speed coaching sessions, we are going to put 15 minutes on the clock, which start as soon as Sharon starts asking her question. And I'm going to answer the question in 15 minutes. Whenever the timer goes off is when we're done. So hopefully we will kind of answer pretty much all of the question or the entirety of the question comprehensively. But we've had occasions where we've had to leave things on a bit of a cliffhanger as well. So we'll see how we get on. But first of all, welcome, Sharon. Really lovely to have you back with us again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
And please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Sharon Jones. I'm based in Warrington in Cheshire in the UK, and I have been working with dogs in the training and behaviour context for about 7 years now. And I started off with my own miniature Schnauzer, Chester, who I rehomed at 7 months old, who was very reactive. And I went on a bit of a journey and a bit of a deep dive and down a big rabbit hole in terms of working to help him with his behaviour, and then decided to train as a trainer and behaviourist, and spent lots of time and money training. And I basically started my own business after 2 years of starting my training, working with dogs, puppies and adult dogs with things like reactivity and struggling with visitors to the home, lead walking, recall, all the basic stuff. But then kind of got really hooked into the reactivity side of things. And I found, because I have Chester and because I'm in the world of miniature Schnauzers, that I was getting a lot of referral for miniature Schnauzers. So about a year ago, I decided to niche, and I am now the Schnauzer trainer, and I train miniature Schnauzers globally all over the world and love doing it.
That's incredible. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but before you got into the dog world, you were a personal trainer, right?
I was, yeah. So I was I worked in the fitness industry as a tutor and a personal trainer. So I used to train people to be personal trainers as well. So my background was very much in training, education, coaching kind of stuff. Yeah. And I had a small personal training business. That's right. So I've transferred all my training, coaching skills into the dog world.
Yeah. And that's the reason I asked, is because I think, that skill set of supporting people, training them, helping them kind of on a journey is not that different from, I guess, sort of a fitness, human health journey to a dog training journey. So I guess there must have been like loads of transferable skills that you could use.
It absolutely is. And then part of my journey in helping people with their fitness and well-being was to learn a subject called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So it's very much about tapping into mindset and motivation and behavior change for humans. So actually as I learned about dog behavior, there's so much overlap, in terms of human behavior and dog behavior and how we learn. So yeah, it's really transferable, very much so.
Yeah, very cool. Yes, I remember that about you. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting journey you've been on. All right. Without further ado, we're going to get into this question. And I love this question, I have to say. I'm going to let you ask the question. And hang on, let me get my timer ready. We are putting 15 minutes on the clock and I'm pressing start right now.
Okay, so working with puppies, I'll often get caregivers and guardians come to me when their puppy is maybe 14 weeks old, 16 weeks old, or even a bit earlier, and they want to go through a course of puppy training, and part of that is the discussion around socialization. And we know that there's a kind of window within the development stage of 3 to 16 weeks, which is a key socialization window. Even though we know socialization can carry on beyond that, there's a key socialization window there. And yet, because of the way vaccinations for distemper, parvovirus and hepatitis are delivered in the UK, quite often there are some vets who will say to the caregivers, you can't take them out until they've been vaccinated, until they've had their second set of vaccinations. And people literally will take that on board. And sometimes that second set of vaccinations doesn't happen until they're 14 or even 16 weeks old. And so they've missed that whole window. Yeah. So it's how best to advise caregivers and guardians around helping their puppies to get sufficient socialization within that window, specifically with other dogs, really, isn't it? Really. And I know that in the Netherlands, I have a colleague in the Netherlands who's a behaviourist, and he said they're in puppy classes by 9 weeks old. And they also introduce the puppies to other dogs who have been vaccinated.
Yep.
So I kind of wanted to ask you about that one as well, because it's not something I wanted to advise without getting some further advice on that. So yeah, what's your take on all of that and helping them get sufficient exposure, because there's over socialization, there's under socialization, it's getting the right amount, and it's getting the right amount for that individual puppy as well. I totally appreciate that. It's just that very often people are missing that window completely because of the vaccination status.
Yeah, brilliant question. And the good news is that there is actually a paper, there is actually some research that was done exactly around this, because of this exact problem, that shows us, well, I'll tell the results of the study in a second, but it's a paper by Stepita Bain et al. So Melissa Bain is a diplomate of the American Veterinary College. I think Stepita must have been a resident at the time that it was done. The paper is from 2013, but it basically compared a subset of puppies that were 16 weeks old. One group of puppies did not attend any socialization classes at all, and the other puppies attended puppy socialization classes at 16 weeks of age after having been vaccinated once against canine parvovirus. And it was actually a pretty decent number of puppies, because sometimes we get very low numbers in sort of behavior research. But we had the group of puppies that were vaccinated at least once and then went to socialization classes was 279 puppies. So a decent amount of puppies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of those puppies that were vaccinated and then went to socialization class, not a single puppy developed parvovirus infection. Okay. So I think that speaks to the safety of, especially after having had one vaccine. And now, depending on the age of the puppy when they start their vaccines, so some puppies will start at 8 weeks of age with their vaccines. Some puppies will start at 10 weeks, some at 12 weeks. Depends a little bit, as to what that kind of early life history is. Depends a little bit as to what the vets recommend. So in the UAE, we would start vaccinations at 8 weeks. So we would do 8, 12, and 16 weeks of age.
Okay.
And I would be really quite happy, to be fair, if I had a puppy that was vaccinated at 8 weeks of age and then 4 weeks later at 12 weeks was able to go to socialization classes, to have at least some of that window. And based on that paper, that research that we have, I would not be worried about parvovirus infection. Now, granted, the research was only on parvovirus. It did not look at distemper or hepatitis. But in my mind, parvo is probably one of the more dangerous viruses for a puppy to become infected with. So that does give me some confidence that would be an okay thing to do.
Okay.
So based on that, and I know your question is a little bit around, what other recommendations could we give caregivers? But I think, and of course, we always have to, I guess, respect the advice that the veterinary practice is giving. And if it is their advice to not socialize the puppies and the client is taking that advice on board, then, there is, I guess, a little bit of, some degree of respect that we also have to give that, and the wishes of the caregiver and the advice that they've been given from the veterinary practice. I wonder whether, I don't know, Sharon, how comfortable you would feel as a non-veterinarian to say, well, there's this research that says, so I'm just putting it out there that there is that research. And I
well, if it's come from you, I'm more than happy to communicate it. But no, yeah, and I think there's a few things here. That number one, I think that sometimes the vet will say, don't take them out until they've had, and then literally people take that literally, don't take them out. So they're not even being exposed to anything, like literally. So there are ways, obviously, of having them where they don't put their paws in contact with the ground. So they could be in a little push buggy, they could be in a little carry, a puppy carry holdall. You know, their paws could go on a towel or a blanket on the ground to just watch and observe the world a little bit from a distance. So there's ways they can be exposed without physical contact with things. But I think the veterinary advice sometimes is to not take them out, and I think people sometimes take it literally, that they just don't take them out. So that's a problem of interpretation of the information that's given. I get that. What about then if say they've had their first vaccinations, they're like 8 weeks old, they've had their first set of vaccinations, and then the introduction to other dogs who had been vaccinated, say like in private settings. So it was a family dog, a friend's dog in private garden, that kind of thing. Would you think that's fairly appropriate?
I mean, I think, look, the vaccine status is the one thing. And I think, yeah, absolutely. As long as that dog has been vaccinated and those vaccines have also remained current, it's not that the dog needs to have been vaccinated every single year, but for the big viruses, so distemper, parvo, and hepatitis, we want them to have at least been vaccinated within the last 3 years, I would say. So we want to make sure, you know, that dog didn't just receive its first sort of set of puppy vaccines and then has never received a follow-up booster since. I would even say puppy vaccines, then booster at 1 year of age, and then after that, you can vaccinate either according to titer, according to calendar, but at least every 3 years. So that's something that I would be really mindful of, and you know, just question that adult dog's caregiver on what the vaccine status actually is. But the other thing I think is you know, choosing the right dog to introduce that puppy to, regardless of vaccine status, being really mindful that they're calm, that they're, you know, that their behavioral communication, body language signs are really good, that it's a dog that, you know, won't be too much for the puppy, or that the puppy might indeed be too much for the other dog. So we maybe also don't want a senior dog, you know, that the puppy's then bouncing all over and that dog might have arthritis. So I think choice of dog is really important in that case, regardless of vaccine status.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, a kind of more savvy dog, a calmer dog. Yeah, and I mean, fortunately for me, I've got like 3 or 4 what I call stooge dogs that I can bring on board. Actually, Chester's become one of them. My own dog, ironically. How about that? The dog that was reactive to everything when 7 months old is now actually a dog that I use to help socialize puppies. So there you go. So yeah, it's got to be a dog that's got a bit of a proven track record in terms of being sociable and calm and savvy. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. Is there any guidance around kind of, I mean, obviously we've got to go by the individual puppy. You're going to get some that come out a little bit more timid and shy, and you get some that come out a little bit more curious and bold and confident. Is there any other guidelines around socialization for puppies that you think are important to consider?
I think, again, really important to read the individual. And if we see any signs of worry, fear, anxiety, stress, to remove them really quickly from the situation, because of the puppy's developing brain at that age, again, fear learning will be really prevalent. And, you know, we talk a lot about these fear periods, which is a bit of an interesting concept to me and something that I questioned a lot during my residency. You know, what does it actually mean, the fear periods? You know, we talk about this sort of first fear period around 16 weeks of age. And then we talk about second, maybe even third fear periods. But the truth of the matter is that puppies start expressing body language signs of being fearful of something at around 8 weeks of age. So pretty early on and way before that first fear period. So I would be really educating caregivers on signs to look out for.
Yeah.
If we have the puppies that are a little bit more bold and a little bit more confident, then we can, I think variety is a really important piece. So different types of people, you know, whether that's children or elderly people dressed in uniforms or high-vis jackets or whatever. And do you know what I really loved that you said earlier that whole idea of world watching.
Mm.
And that can almost be done from the safety of your, like, the front doorstep.
Yeah.
So puppy sits by the front door, you know, you've got treats and maybe a snuffle mat and maybe, you know, Kong and bits and bobs there. And the puppy can literally just watch the world go by. Now, obviously, it depends on what that world looks like outside, you know, that
Yeah.
particular home.
Yeah.
But if you can even, you know, have friends come over, maybe, you know, walk past with a bicycle or a pushchair or things like that, and the dog has that comfort of having both the caregiver next to them, but also being able to retreat back into the home if
Yeah.
things get too much for them. I think
Yeah.
that's a really, really lovely approach to take, and always err on the side of caution. You know, don't think, God, I've only got this really short window, I've got to, like, now expose them to everything, because after that, that's it, you know, it's game over, and I've missed an opportunity. That, you know, like you said, learning continues to happen. That's also not how that works. So being really mindful of all the little signs, and allowing the puppy to avoid and take themselves away if they get overwhelmed with things is really important.
Yeah, and I actually did that from the car for Chester. He was very happy in a soft crate in the boot.
Yeah.
So the boot door's up. He's got his lovely cozy bed in the back with his lovely comfortable bedding, and he could go in there whenever he wants, but he pokes his head out and I could park it up in places where he could just watch, you know, and he could do some counter conditioning if he needed to in that situation. So yeah, so there's a lot of things for dogs. You know, there's this habituation and socialization that's important, isn't there? Habituating them to the world at large, to the things they're going to have to be exposed to on a regular basis, and then those social interactions, and just learning some social interaction at a time that's right for them and in the right way. I just felt the question came up because, you know, there was a repeated experience of caregivers that felt they couldn't take the puppies out full stop unless they've been vaccinated, fully vaccinated.
And look, and if you do have a caregiver that is quite fearful about that, and we have some caregivers, you know, where the physical health of the dog overrides the mental and emotional health. So there's a bit of education to be done there around that, but there might still be some that are just too fearful, or they absolutely want to follow what the vet said, you know, to the T. And we've just, I think, identified that there are still so many things that they can do from the safety of their own home. So I think that even that's been really valuable to just kind of sort of bring that to the forefront again, that look, if your caregiver wants to stay at home, fine, but then, you know, give them like loads of like world watching or car watching, or, you know, whatever it is to do, and they can still do quite a lot. And maybe even in some cases, being able to observe things at a distance and habituate and see things at a distance might even be safer than having a million people or dogs come up to them and be all over them. So, you know, there might be a little hidden sort of positivity, maybe even in that somewhere.
Yeah. And I feel as well that, you know, there is a big message, isn't there, that's been consistently given to puppy owners and caregivers for years now, to get out and say hello to other dogs, and get out and say hello to people, and get them to see different types of people and different types of dogs. And that, you know, with the best of intentions, there are a lot of people who do go out with that intention, and they probably say hello to a bit too many. and then the dog reaches adolescence, and there comes a point where, you know, their expectations are thwarted, and they can't say hello to that dog, and they can't, and that's potentially the start of reactivity. So for me, it's quite important that there's you know, a bit of let's walk past that dog, and let's walk past that person, as well as let's say hello as well.
No, I love that. I think you're right. It's all about future, and there's the timer. But I'm just going to finish my sentence. But it's all about future proofing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we also mustn't forget we've got time. We've got a lifetime with this dog. It doesn't all have to be achieved in the first 16 weeks.
No,
you know, that's
and I think people have. Yeah, and people do think that. That's the thing, because of the messaging, you know, this big checklist of you must expose them to this, and this. You know, we kind of need to ditch that, I feel, and just kind of, like you say, take our time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take our time. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
What a great topic that was, and it's enabled me to dig back into my literature. I knew I read that for my board exams. You know, when you're like, oh, I know there's a paper about that, I'm just going to go and reread that paper again, and bring that out. But I think that's a valuable one. So I will definitely link that paper in the show notes, so that everyone can have a read of that if they'd like to. It's a really interesting study, and it's really, really valuable to have a read through that. And then if anybody else who's listening to this podcast would like to take part in a 15-minute speed coaching session, please do drop us a line. Either email us at info@trinityvetbehavior.com or contact us on one of our social media challenge, and we can send you a little questionnaire assessment to see whether you would like to be on the show. And that just remains for me to thank Sharon so much for her amazing question and for joining me on our ever popular 15-minute speed coaching sessions today.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. So it's always a pleasure. So thank you very much.
No, my absolute pleasure. And yeah, for everyone listening, I hope that was useful. Hope that's given you a few ideas and thoughts about socialization in puppies, socialization and habituation, because you're absolutely right. The two are different and we need to be thinking about both. And I very much look forward to seeing you next week for episode 149. Bye for now.
Thank you.